A tiny, white-tipped stick lies abandoned on a sterile hospital tray. A young child sits in a brightly lit emergency room, clutching a blood-stained bandage to their ear. Medical charts in the Journal of Pediatrics reveal a grim daily statistic. 34 children every single day are treated for traumatic ear injuries. The culprit is not a jagged rock or a sharp toy. It is the very household object marketed to keep them clean. But to understand how a simple cotton swab became a primary cause of emergency room visits, we must look at the long, dangerous history of human ear hygiene. For thousands of years, humans used rigid tools to scrape the delicate canals of the ear. Archaeologists have unearthed Bronze Age scoops crafted from polished gold, silver, and bone. In ancient Rome, the Auriscalpium served as the standard medical instrument for the wealthy. Physician Galen, writing in the 2nd century, documented the use of these tools in his medical treatises. He warned his contemporaries of a singular, recurring danger. Deep insertion of any instrument risked a catastrophic rupture of the eardrum. The Japanese tradition of the mimikaki utilized thin, curved bamboo to clear the canal. This practice functioned more as a ritual of intimacy than a clinical necessity. By the 18th century, the specialized profession of the aurist emerged across Europe. Practitioners like Jean-Marie Gaspard Itard, the father of modern otology, sought safer methods. He utilized glass and pewter syringes to flush the ear with warm water. This method targeted impacted cerumen without the risk of physical scraping. Yet, outside the doctor's office, the public relied on desperate, improvised solutions. Personal diaries and etiquette manuals from the 1700s described the use of quill feathers. Others twisted fine linen or used the blunt ends of metal hairpins to reach the itch. The transition to a mass-produced solution arrived in 1923. Polish-American entrepreneur Leo Gerstenzang watched his wife attach cotton balls to toothpicks. She created a makeshift tool to clean their infants' ears. Gerstenzang saw an opportunity for a standardized, factory-made product. He established the Leo Gerstenzang Infant Novelty Company. The product hit the market under the brand name Baby Gaze. Early marketing focused exclusively on the delicate hygiene needs of newborns. It took decades for the product to pivot toward the adult market. Advertisements began to suggest the cotton swab was a safe, essential tool for everyone. The medical community, however, gathered data that contradicted these glossy campaigns. The American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery eventually issued formal warnings. They documented that cotton swabs were a leading cause of cerumen impaction. Instead of removing wax, the cotton tip pushed it deeper into the canal. Clinical studies in JAMA otolaryngology confirmed the high rate of traumatic tympanic membrane perforation. The irony remained sharp and persistent. A tool designed for cleanliness became a primary source of physical trauma. The habit of internal ear cleaning continued despite the growing mountain of medical evidence. Millions of these sticks are sold annually, carrying the same risks identified by ancient physicians. The modern medical consensus remains clear, though it is often ignored in the bathroom mirror. The ear is a self-cleaning organ, and it requires no intervention from a cotton tip. The history of the swab is a story of convenience colliding with anatomy. It turned a simple, ancient ritual into a modern medical hazard. Archaeologists brushed away layers of dry, compacted earth at ancient burial sites. They uncovered small, metallic objects buried alongside the remains of Bronze Age inhabitants. These tools were delicate scoops, designed with a curved, spoon-like tip. Craftsmen fashioned these instruments from polished bronze, silver, and gold. Other examples recovered from the same era were carved from animal bone. These artifacts appeared in excavations across both Europe and Asia. The design was consistent across vast distances and different cultures. Each scoop featured a slender handle, often ending in a small loop or decorative finial. The physical evidence suggested a standardized purpose for the tool. The curved end functioned as a miniature shovel for the ear canal. These were not heavy-duty implements for labor or combat. They were refined items of personal care, meant for the human body. The presence of precious metals indicated that ear cleaning was a ritual of the elite. Only the wealthy could afford tools crafted from gold or silver. For the common person, bone remained the primary material for such hygiene. The tools survived for thousands of years, preserved in the silence of the grave. They sat in museum displays today, silent witnesses to an ancient, persistent urge. The necessity of removing earwax was a human constant, spanning millennia. These Bronze Age scoops established a precedent for manual ear intervention. The practice was not a modern invention of convenience. It was an ingrained habit that predated recorded history. The tools were elegant, yet their function carried inherent risks for the delicate anatomy. Ancient users held these rigid handles with practiced, steady hands. They scraped the interior of the ear to maintain a sense of cleanliness. This physical act bridged the gap between the ancient world and the modern bathroom. The desire to reach the unreachable itch remained a universal human trait. Yet, every scrape of the metal against the canal wall carried the threat of injury. The Bronze Age scoop provided the mechanism for a habit that would eventually become a medical hazard. The Roman Empire standardized the rituals of personal maintenance. Wealthy citizens relied on the Auriscalpium to manage their ears. This instrument functioned as a specialized medical tool for the elite. Archaeologists found these metal picks in sites across the Roman world. Craftsmen usually forged the stems from bronze or polished silver. The design featured a thin, elongated handle for precise control. The tip curved into a small, blunt scoop for gathering cerumen. But to understand the medical risks involved, one must look at the writings of the era. Galen, the prominent Roman physician, documented these procedures in the 2nd century. He observed the widespread use of the Auriscalpium among his contemporaries. His medical treatises provided a clear warning to those who used the tool. Galen stated that deep insertion of the instrument risked a catastrophic rupture. The eardrum remained an incredibly delicate membrane within the canal. Pressure from the metal scoop could pierce the structure instantly. He cautioned that even minor slips caused permanent damage to the patient. The Roman medical establishment recognized the danger of the practice early on. Yet the demand for clear ear canals drove the persistent use of these picks. Hygiene remained a public performance of status in civilization. The Auriscalpium sat on vanity tables alongside strigils and oil flasks. It was a standard piece of equipment for the Roman bathhouse experience. The tool reflected the Roman obsession with order and bodily control. But the reality of the anatomy contradicted the convenience of the instrument. Physicians like Galen watched the consequences of these hygiene habits unfold. They recorded the injuries caused by the very tools meant to sanitize. The Auriscalpium was a refined object with a hidden dangerous potential. It marked the beginning of a long history of human ear intervention. The Roman approach established a framework for medical observation of the ear. It proved that the desire for cleanliness often outweighed the risk of injury. The tool persisted as a staple of Roman life for centuries. It served as a physical reminder of the limits of ancient medical safety. Across the sea from Rome, a different tradition took root in Japan. Craftsmen shaped a tool from slender, flexible bamboo. They called this instrument the mimikaki. It lacked the rigid, metallic bite of the Roman Auriscalpium. The bamboo tip offered a gentle, scraping, tactile sensation. Families passed these tools down through generations. The mimikaki became a quiet ritual of domestic life. It was never viewed as a purely clinical device. Instead, the tool served as a gesture of profound intimacy. A parent often cleaned the ears of a young child. Partners used the tool to care for one another. The act was slow, rhythmic, and intentional. It required the person being cleaned to lie perfectly still. The user held the bamboo pick with a light, practiced touch. They gathered cerumen with the small, curved end of the wood. The process prioritized comfort over the sterile efficiency of a syringe. This ritual built trust within the household. It transformed a necessary bodily function into a shared moment. The mimikaki remained a staple of Japanese culture for centuries. It survived the rise of modern medicine and industrial manufacturing. Even as other cultures adopted the swab, Japan retained the bamboo pick. The tool reflected a different philosophy of the human body. It was not a hidden chore performed in isolation. It was a social act of care and attention. The bamboo did not threaten the eardrum like a metal scoop. It was soft against the delicate skin of the canal. The mimikaki stood as a testament to cultural preference. History proved that ear hygiene varied wildly across the globe. Western medicine favored the irrigation of the canal. The Japanese tradition favored the manual, rhythmic cleaning. Both methods sought the same result through different cultural lenses. The reality was that the ear remained a focal point of care. Human beings across every continent felt the need to clear the canal. Whether using gold, bronze, or bamboo, the urge was constant. The mimikaki stayed firmly rooted in the home. It never evolved into a mass-marketed medical disposable. The tool remained a simple carved piece of nature. Its history was one of patience rather than industrial speed. The ritualized nature of the act minimized the desire for force. Users understood the limitations of the tool through long practice. The mimikaki did not promise a quick, sterile fix. It promised a moment of connection between two people. This cultural perspective shielded the practice from the risks of mass-marketed tools. The bamboo pick survived because it remained a human interaction. It was never just about the wax. It was about the time spent together in the quiet of the home. The tradition highlighted the deep divide in how societies viewed the body. One culture sought to flush the ear with medical precision. Another culture sought to maintain the ear through gentle contact. The mimikaki proved that technology was not the only path. History often ignored these quiet, persistent domestic habits. Yet they defined the daily reality of millions for centuries. The bamboo scoop remained a symbol of that long, shared history. By the 18th century, the care of the human ear shifted from the home to the professional clinic. Specialists known as aurists emerged across European cities to address persistent hearing ailments. These practitioners claimed expertise in the complex mechanics of the inner ear. They established a formal medical trade focused on the removal of hardened earwax. Jean-Marie Gaspard Itard, a French physician, pioneered the formal study of these conditions. He worked in Paris and earned recognition as the father of modern otology. His medical treatises documented the standard procedures for managing impacted cerumen in the 1700s. But to understand the clinical standard of the time, one must examine his preferred method. Itard moved away from the sharp, rigid scoops favored by the Romans. He championed the use of oral irrigation as a safer, more effective alternative. The aurist utilized specialized syringes constructed from pewter or glass. These instruments allowed the practitioner to flush the canal with warm water. The goal was to dislodge wax through controlled pressure and fluid motion. Itard recorded the successes and the limitations of these mechanical interventions in his writings. He recognized that the human ear canal remained a treacherous territory for any tool. The syringe provided a buffer that metal picks could not replicate. Still, the process required a steady hand and a deep knowledge of anatomy. Physicians documented the process of injecting solutions to soften the impaction. The patient sat motionless, while the aurist administered the pressurized fluid. Cleanliness became a professionalized service rather than a casual domestic chore. The aurist occupied a place of authority in the medical hierarchy of the Enlightenment. Their clinics attracted patients seeking relief from the muffled sounds of blockage. Itard's work laid the groundwork for the clinical standards of the coming centuries. He insisted on the careful observation of the canal before any procedure began. The transition from the pick to the syringe marked a significant change in medical thought. The reality was that even professionalized care carried inherent risks of infection. The primitive syringes often lacked the sterile precision of modern medical equipment. Yet, the aurists persisted in their practice across the major capitals of Europe. Their methods dominated the professional landscape for nearly 2 centuries. The shift signaled a broader movement toward institutionalized medical intervention for common ailments. The ear was no longer just a site for grooming, it was a site for medicine. Before the rise of industrial hygiene, the common home lacked a dedicated tool for the ear. People relied on whatever slender object sat within arm's reach. 18th century etiquette manuals recorded the widespread use of everyday household items for this purpose. A sharpened quill feather served as the primary tool for the average European household. The hollow shaft of a goose feather provided the necessary flexibility and reach. Diaries from the period described the practice of stripping the barbs to create a soft, blunt tip. Individuals dipped the quill into oil or water to soften hardened wax before extraction. This method appeared in personal journals as a routine part of morning grooming. Linen also played a vital role in pre-industrial ear care. Households twisted small strips of fabric into thin, absorbent wicks. These wicks functioned like primitive sponges when inserted into the outer canal. They drew moisture and debris outward without the danger of a rigid metal probe. Hairpins provided a more aggressive alternative for those seeking a deeper clean. Women frequently utilized the fine, rounded tips of their hairpins to scrape away stubborn cerumen. These metal tools offered precision but carried significant risks of abrasion. Manuals warned that the sharp ends could easily pierce the delicate skin of the canal. Yet the practice persisted across social classes throughout the 1700s. The act remained a private, improvised necessity, performed without the aid of a specialist. Each household developed its own preferred method based on available materials. These tools required a steady hand and a cautious approach to avoid permanent injury. The lack of standardized medical devices meant that every cleaning was an experiment. The reality was that these domestic habits left no room for error. A slip of the hand with a metal hairpin could lead to infection or hearing loss. The medical literature of the era remained largely silent on these homegrown techniques. Physicians focused their attention on the professional interventions provided in clinics. But to understand the common experience, one must look at these mundane, improvised daily routines. Millions of people maintained their ears with nothing more than a feather or a scrap of cloth. This era of improvisation ended only when mass-produced cotton tools arrived on the market. The transition from a quill feather to a manufactured swab marked a permanent shift in hygiene. It replaced the careful, tactile work of the individual with a disposable, commercialized product. The history of the ear remained a story of simple tools meeting a biological need. In 1923, a Polish-American entrepreneur named Leo Gerstenzang lived in the United States. He watched his wife perform a daily task for their infant child. She took a wooden toothpick and wrapped a small tuft of cotton around the tip. She used this handmade implement to clean the child's ears. Leo Gerstenzang saw a commercial opportunity in this simple domestic improvisation. He recognized that parents required a safer, more reliable tool for infant hygiene. He founded the Infant Novelty Company to manufacture his new invention. The product consisted of a wooden stick with a cotton tip securely attached at one end. He officially branded these mass-produced items as Baby Gaze. This marked the first time a disposable cotton swab reached the consumer market. The invention replaced the inconsistent homemade quills and linen strips of the previous century. Leo Gerstenzang marketed the Baby Gaze specifically for the delicate ears of infants. He positioned the product as a convenient, sanitary solution for modern parents. The wooden stick provided a firm handle for precise movement. The soft cotton tip offered a gentle surface for cleaning sensitive skin. Parents across the country adopted the new tool for their daily nursery routines. The era of the improvised quill feather effectively ended in the American household. Leo Gerstenzang had successfully industrialized a private, improvised act of care. The product was not yet a household name in the broader sense. It remained a specialized item for the care of the very young. But to understand why this moment shifted history, you need to see how quickly the branding changed. The name Baby Gaze soon gave way to a more recognizable identity. The company rebranded the product as Q-tips. The letter Q stood for quality, a hallmark of the new manufacturing standard. What began as a solution for infants soon moved toward the adult medicine cabinet. The transition from a specialized nursery tool to a universal household staple had begun. The simplicity of the design masked the long-term medical consequences of its widespread use. Leo Gerstenzang had created an object that would eventually change human hygiene forever. He did not foresee the clinical warnings that would follow decades later. The product traveled from the nursery into the bathrooms of millions of homes. The cotton swab became a permanent feature of the modern daily ritual. The name Baby Gaze vanished from the packaging by the late 1920s. Leo Gerstenzang recognized that the name failed to capture the broader potential of his invention. He introduced the brand name Q-tips to the American public. The letter Q stood for quality, a hallmark of his new manufacturing process. The packaging transitioned from a nursery specialty to a household necessity. Advertisements in the 1940s and 1950s began to shift their target demographic. Print campaigns in major magazines no longer focused solely on the care of infants. The marketing copy expanded to suggest the tool was perfect for the entire family. Spotless bathrooms in advertisements featured the box prominently on the medicine cabinet shelf. The product became synonymous with modern cleanliness and domestic efficiency. Commercials promised a sanitary solution for the daily removal of earwax. These campaigns masked the anatomical reality of the ear canal. Consumers across the United States accepted the swab as a standard bathroom item. The marketing success was immediate and overwhelming. Gerstenzang moved his production into a new facility to meet the rising national demand. The wooden stick and the soft cotton tip became a ubiquitous presence in American life. Retailers stocked the boxes next to toothpaste, soap, and hairbrushes. The transition from a specialized baby product to a universal tool was complete. Mid-century advertising cemented the belief that internal ear cleaning was a healthy habit. The subtle shift in messaging normalized a practice that physicians had not yet fully challenged. The Q-tip transformed from a parenting aid into an essential grooming standard. Millions of households adopted the swab as a routine part of their morning hygiene. The simplicity of the design encouraged frequent and aggressive use. The commercial success of the brand effectively erased the memory of the quill and the linen strip. The cotton swab became the definitive, mass-produced answer to an ancient human problem. The marketing machine had succeeded in making a small, disposable stick a permanent fixture of modern life. The marketing campaigns of the 1950s painted a picture of absolute safety. Glossy magazine advertisements promised a clean, sanitary lifestyle for every American family. These commercials featured the cotton swab as an essential tool for the ear canal. But to understand why this marketing was so dangerous, you need to see the clinical data that emerged decades later. The American Academy of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, began to track the fallout. Physicians observed a pattern of injuries that defied the corporate messaging. Clinical studies published in journals like JAMA Otolaryngology documented the physical consequences of the habit. The reality was that the ear canal possessed a self-cleaning mechanism. It naturally migrated wax outward, away from the delicate structures of the inner ear. The introduction of a firm cotton-tipped applicator interrupted this biological process. Instead of removing the wax, the swab acted like a piston in a cylinder. It compressed the cerumen deeper into the canal against the eardrum. This process created what doctors officially termed cerumen impaction. The medical literature recorded the severe risks of this common mistake. Patients frequently arrived at clinics suffering from sharp, sudden pain and hearing loss. The force of the stick often caused traumatic tympanic membrane perforation. The eardrum, a thin and sensitive tissue, could not withstand the pressure of a wooden stem. Data from the Journal of Pediatrics revealed the human cost of these grooming habits. Researchers found that approximately 34 children per day were treated in U.S. emergency departments for ear injuries. These injuries were directly attributed to the use of cotton-tipped applicators. The contrast between the product's marketing and the clinical reality was stark. Advertising suggested a gentle path to hygiene for the entire family. Medical reports described a leading cause of preventable ear trauma. The convenience of the product had effectively overridden the warnings of the medical community. The habit of internal ear cleaning had become a deeply ingrained daily ritual. Yet, the anatomical danger of the practice remained fixed and unyielding. Millions continued to push the cotton deeper, trusting the brand over the clinical evidence. The injury statistics continued to rise as the swab became a bathroom staple. The medical consensus shifted to a clear, firm warning against internal use. The once celebrated tool was now classified by experts as a primary hazard. History had turned a simple domestic improvement into a modern medical crisis. The American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery issued a definitive clinical stance. Their guidelines classified the ear canal as a self-cleaning biological system. Physicians confirmed that wax naturally migrates outward toward the outer ear. The introduction of any foreign object disrupts this delicate process. Medical data from the Academy officially labeled cotton-tipped applicators as a primary hazard. The organization warned that internal use leads directly to cerumen impaction. They documented the high frequency of tympanic membrane perforations in emergency rooms. Clinical records showed that these injuries often required surgical intervention to repair. The warning stood in direct opposition to decades of consumer product advertising. Modern otolaryngology textbooks now cite these tools as a leading cause of preventable trauma. Physicians across the world continue to advise against inserting anything smaller than an elbow into the ear. The convenience of the modern bathroom ritual masked a long-standing medical warning. The simple wooden stick remained a fixture in medicine cabinets, despite the clinical evidence. The cycle of injury persisted as millions ignored the documented risks to their hearing. You reach for the box in your medicine cabinet because the habit feels harmless. You trust the familiar white stick to provide a clean, simple relief. But that small, soft tip is a piston pushing danger into the dark, and your own hand is the one driving the damage home.